There is a story about the psychologist Carl Jung that almost everyone misunderstands. It is said that one day, a woman walked into his office completely shattered after being betrayed. While she cried uncontrollably, she kept repeating the same sentence over and over again. With a trembling voice, she told Jung that she could not understand how someone could do something like that to her. Jung listened to her in silence. He observed her pain carefully, and suddenly he realized something profound. That woman was not crying simply because someone had lied to her. She was not suffering because of an ordinary deception. She was crying because the person she had created in her imagination had never truly existed at all. And in that exact moment, Jung noticed something deeply disturbing. The real source of her pain was not reality itself, but the instant when her fantasy finally collapsed. Because deep inside, the human mind has a dangerous habit when it comes to the people we admire, desire, or love. Our minds automatically fill in the missing pieces. You meet someone who appears confident, and your brain immediately assumes they must also be loyal. You meet someone attractive, and your mind convinces you they must have a good heart. You meet someone who listens to you during one difficult day, and suddenly you begin constructing an entire perfect personality around them that was never really there. What nobody tells you is that most people are not truly in relationships with other human beings. They are in relationships with the projections they created inside their own minds. And sooner or later, reality always knocks at the door. But reality does not arrive loudly. It comes in silence. It appears in messages that suddenly take days to be answered, in those small acts of disrespect disguised as harmless jokes. In the cold distance, you begin to feel right after you stop being useful to someone. In that heavy feeling that a person only values you when you are willing to give them all your energy, attention, and time. You have probably experienced this at some point in your life, even if admitting it out loud feels uncomfortable. I am talking about that moment when you realize that the version of someone living inside your head is far warmer, kinder, and more human than the real person standing in front of you. And once you realize that, something inside you changes forever. Because when your eyes finally open, you begin to notice how people constantly perform different versions of themselves depending on who they are around. The friend who seems loyal in front of you becomes someone completely different behind your back. The kind person suddenly becomes cruel the moment they gain a little social power. The one who claimed to value honesty immediately becomes defensive the second you decide to tell the truth. Reaching this level of awareness already separates you from the majority. Most people would rather continue living inside a comfortable illusion than face the painful reality standing right in front of them. They would rather defend the fantasy than accept the truth. But if you have decided to stop deceiving yourself, then you are beginning to see people for who they truly are. And the most unsettling part of all is that many of these individuals are not consciously pretending. They genuinely believe they are the mask they wear. Carl Jung explained that every human being carries a shadow within themselves. That shadow is the hidden part of our personality that we refuse to confront. And the more a person avoids facing their own darkness, the more artificial and empty their personality becomes. That is why certain people leave you with a strange sense of emptiness once you truly get to know them. Because performance cannot last forever. Eventually, the character begins to crack. The mask slips for a brief second, and suddenly, you catch a glimpse of the insecurity hidden beneath the charm, the envy hidden beneath the support, the need for control hidden behind affection. People are not truly afraid of being seen. What terrifies them is being completely seen. And the moment you begin noticing the truth behind the mask, something subtle starts changing inside you. You stop listening only to the words people say, and you begin observing their behavioral patterns instead, because words can lie very easily. Words can flatter you. Words can manipulate you. Words can pretend. But patterns reveal the things people spend their entire lives trying to hide. Suddenly you notice how some people only become affectionate when they feel you pulling away from them. You notice how respect appears out of nowhere only after you create distance. You notice how the attention they once denied you magically increases the moment you stop chasing it. At that point, it becomes almost impossible not to see reality for what it truly is. Human behavior is deeply reactive, and the sad truth is that most people do not value what is constantly available to them every single day. They value what feels difficult to keep. They value what they fear losing. That is why kindness and genuine goodwill are often ignored until the day they disappear. Giving endlessly without clear boundaries is not always an act of love. Sometimes it is a silent lesson, teaching others exactly how to use you. And perhaps the most disturbing part is how early this conditioning begins in our lives. You probably witnessed it in school when you were younger, even though at that age you did not yet have the mental tools to fully understand it. You saw the quiet student become the target of ridicule simply because they tolerated disrespect without defending themselves. You saw the arrogant person receive admiration despite treating others badly. You saw the individual who constantly sacrificed themselves for the group slowly become invisible in the eyes of everyone else. It is almost as if human beings unconsciously organize themselves around power dynamics from a very early age, long before morality ever enters the picture. And once you truly see this pattern, you cannot unsee it anymore. You begin understanding that many relationships are not built on love, respect, or authenticity, but on silent negotiations of emotional power. Some people stay close to you only while you provide comfort, validation, attention, or emotional security. The moment you stop feeding those needs, their behavior changes completely. That realization can feel painful at first, but it is also liberating, because the moment you stop idealizing people, you stop surrendering your peace to illusions. You stop begging others to become the fantasy you created in your own mind. You stop exhausting yourself trying to earn love from individuals who only appreciate your presence when it benefits them. And for the first time in your life, you begin relating to reality instead of imagination. That is where true psychological maturity begins, not when you become colder, not when you stop loving, but when you finally learn to see clearly without allowing your desires, loneliness, or fantasies to blind you anymore. Because the greatest danger was never the betrayal itself. The greatest danger was believing in a version of someone that never truly existed. This is where Jung's ideas begin to take on a far darker meaning. He believed that everything people refuse to confront within themselves eventually gets projected onto others. And once you truly understand how this psychological projection works, social life starts to feel deeply unsettling. You begin to notice that the most insecure person in the room is often the first to accuse everyone else of seeking attention. You realize that the one who secretly lies and betrays others becomes obsessed with demanding absolute loyalty. You notice that the people who try to control every step you take are the same ones who call themselves protectors. And those who are terrified of abandonment are often the very people who emotionally suffocate everyone around them. In the end, people always reveal who they truly are, but rarely through direct confession. They reveal themselves through the repeated patterns of their behavior. And once you begin paying attention to those patterns, your entire understanding of relationships changes forever. You stop judging people based on isolated moments where they treated you well, and instead you begin observing who they consistently become over time. Because in the end, consistency exposes reality more clearly than words ever could. You start noticing that friend who only reaches out when their life is collapsing and they need emotional rescue. You recognize the person who subtly competes with you in every conversation, always trying to appear slightly superior, slightly more successful, slightly more important. And then comes one of the most painful realizations of all. You remember the moments when you allowed yourself to be vulnerable, when you opened your heart and shared your struggles, only to later discover that your pain had quietly been stored away and turned into ammunition against you. At first, these realizations hurt deeply. They hurt because the human mind naturally wants to defend the people in whom it has invested time, love, energy, and emotional attachment. So you begin justifying everything to protect yourself from disappointment. You tell yourself they are simply stressed. You convince yourself they did not mean what they said. You repeat the familiar excuse that this is just the way they are, as if accepting harmful behavior were the price of maintaining connection. But eventually, a darker thought begins to emerge in your mind. You start wondering what if, all this time, you have been translating serious disrespect into harmless misunderstandings simply because you were afraid of losing certain people, and that single question changes everything. Suddenly you begin to see that many relationships survive, not because of love, but because of denial. Denial is what keeps broken families functioning on the surface, while emotional distance grows underneath. Denial is what allows toxic friendships to continue for years without anyone speaking honestly. Denial is what keeps people emotionally attached to those who stopped valuing them long ago. The painful truth is that most relationships do not end when respect disappears. They end the moment awareness appears. Because once awareness enters the picture, psychological distance becomes inevitable. Sometimes that distance is not physical at all. People may still sit beside each other, talk every day, or pretend nothing has changed. But internally, something breaks, something disconnects. You begin feeling strangely detached during conversations that once meant everything to you. Certain compliments suddenly sound transactional, as if they carry hidden expectations beneath the surface. Certain displays of affection begin to feel strategic rather than sincere, almost like emotional investments designed to produce a future reward. And once you stop being hypnotized by superficial charm, social dynamics become impossible to ignore. You notice how groups quietly punish authenticity. You observe how uncomfortable people become when someone refuses to continue performing the role assigned to them. You realize that genuine honesty threatens social systems built upon polite deception. Because most social structures are not built on truth. They are built on a silent agreement to avoid saying out loud what everyone already sees. And the moment someone breaks that illusion, that person becomes the problem. That is the strange loneliness that comes with seeing reality too clearly. You become far more difficult to manipulate, but at the same time, you begin struggling to fully belong anywhere. Because once you stop romanticizing people, you realize how much of social life depends on performance. You start carefully observing how drastically human behavior changes depending on status and power. You watch insecure people become extremely submissive in the presence of authority, desperate for validation and approval. Meanwhile, those who feel powerful often treat people they perceive as weaker, with cold indifference or quiet contempt. You even begin noticing how morality itself shifts depending on the social reward attached to it. Someone may publicly condemn betrayal because it earns admiration and makes them appear virtuous, while privately betraying the trust of others without the slightest remorse. And that contradiction reveals something deeply disturbing about human nature. Many people are not guided by principles, but by perception. They do not ask themselves what is right. They ask themselves what will protect their image. The more conscious you become of these patterns, the harder it is to return to unconscious living. You begin seeing that many conversations are not genuine exchanges, but subtle negotiations for validation, control, status, or emotional security. Even kindness can sometimes hide manipulation beneath its surface. Even loyalty can occasionally be driven by fear rather than love. And perhaps that is one of the heaviest truths of all. Once your perception changes, innocence disappears. You can no longer fully unsee the hidden motivations behind human behavior. You start realizing that many people are not connected to who they truly are, but to the masks they believe they must wear in order to survive socially. Some wear the mask of confidence to hide deep insecurity. Others wear the mask of kindness because they fear rejection. Some pretend to be emotionally detached while secretly craving love and validation more than anything else. And the tragedy is that many people become so attached to these masks that they no longer know who they are underneath them. This is why awareness can feel isolating, not because you hate people, but because you begin seeing beyond appearances. You stop falling in love with potential and start paying attention to patterns. You stop listening only to words and begin observing actions. And once you learn to observe behavior without illusion, people unconsciously reveal far more than they ever intended to. But strangely enough, this awareness is not meant to make you cynical. It is meant to make you conscious. Because there is a difference between distrusting humanity and finally seeing it clearly. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself in order to preserve comforting illusions. And perhaps true maturity begins the moment you accept that not everyone who smiles at you supports you, not everyone who stays loves you, and not everyone who speaks kindly carries good intentions inside their heart. Once you understand that, your relationships begin to change naturally. You become quieter, more observant, less reactive. You stop chasing approval. You stop explaining yourself endlessly to people committed to misunderstanding you. And slowly, almost without noticing it, you begin protecting your energy with the same intensity you once used to protect other people's feelings. Because eventually, you realize that seeing reality clearly is painful, but far less painful than spending your entire life trapped inside comforting lies. Carl Jung understood something truly brutal about human nature. A person's ego will protect its own image at any cost. Deep down, almost everyone desperately wants to believe they are good. And because of that, instead of confronting their own darkness, the human mind creates flawless excuses to justify it. Cruelty suddenly disguises itself as honesty. Manipulation hides behind the word love. Absolute control is presented as protection. and toxic jealousy is explained away as concern. The mind possesses a terrifying ability to conceal its real motives, especially from itself. That is why the most dangerous people you will ever encounter are not always the ones who openly act with evil intentions. The truly dangerous ones are often those who are completely convinced of their own innocence. They are the friends who slowly destroy your peace while insisting they are only trying to help you. They are the people who drain your energy while maintaining the image that they are the wounded ones. They create emotional chaos and then act like victims the moment you finally react to that chaos. They exhaust you psychologically while preserving the illusion that they are the ones suffering the most. Because in human relationships, playing the victim can become an incredibly subtle way of gaining power over another person. Once you begin to understand this mechanism, the way you see the world changes forever. You stop paying so much attention to what people say, and you begin asking a much deeper question. What is this person emotionally trying to obtain from me? That single question reveals almost everything. Some people only want admiration. Others want obedience. Many are simply searching for someone they can stand above temporarily, so they can escape their own feelings of inferiority. Very few people genuinely seek true connection. Most are only searching for relief from an inner emptiness they cannot face when they are alone. And this is where the illusion of romance begins to collapse completely. You realize that many relationships are not built upon love at all, but upon silent psychological contracts. I will make you feel valuable as long as you make me feel desired. I will save you if you promise never to abandon me. I will admire you as long as you protect me from my loneliness. That is why people can change so suddenly when the emotional exchange no longer benefits them. It is not that they became different overnight. It is that the mask always had conditions attached to it, and eventually those conditions reveal themselves. This truth becomes impossible to ignore when you go through a profound transformation in your own life. The moment you achieve success, hidden envy begins to surface. The moment you establish boundaries, the selfishness of others reveals itself. Nothing exposes human nature faster than daring to step outside the role of people assigned to you. Suddenly, the quiet person becomes confident. The person who always said yes finally learns to say no. And almost magically, those who once claimed to love them begin to feel uncomfortable. Because sometimes people do not love who you are becoming. Sometimes they only loved the older version of you, the version that was easier to control, easier to manipulate, easier to predict. But this realization does not make you hate humanity. It simply destroys the fantasy. And when the illusion disappears, loneliness begins to feel different. It no longer feels like a punishment. It begins to feel like clarity. You finally understand that being surrounded by people and being truly understood are completely different experiences. Then comes the real psychological shock, the part most people avoid in silence. The true horror does not begin when you recognize the performance in others. It begins when you recognize the same darkness inside yourself. You catch yourself pretending not to care just to protect your ego. You notice yourself craving validation without wanting to admit it. You realize that the need for control, attention, and emotional reassurance also exists within you. And in that moment, the comforting illusion that you are somehow different or morally superior to everyone else also collapses. Paradoxically, that is where the real transformation begins. Because true maturity starts the day you stop searching for perfect people and begin seeing human beings for what they truly are, frightened and wounded souls, trying to survive in the only ways they know how, including yourself. The day you stop romanticizing people is the day you stop begging reality to become softer than it really is. Your vision becomes clear. Because, in the end, the greatest danger was never simply that other people could deceive you. The greatest danger was that your own loneliness and your own fantasies could deceive you first. And once you finally understand this, human nature no longer terrifies you. You simply accept it. You realize that this crisis, this pain that comes from seeing reality as it truly is, often appears right before the most important chapter of your life begins. The psychological pressure you feel when the masks start falling apart is not there to destroy you. At first, letting go of illusions hurts deeply, but eventually you understand something liberating. Everything was already pushing you toward the truth, because only when you stop loving a fantasy can you finally begin to live for real.